Welcome to the Choir Conductor podcast. Each episode features a conversation with people in the choir or music education profession. I am your host, Zach Thompson. Let's start the show. My guest today is Tim Foskey. Tim Foskey is a choir director in Matthews, North Carolina, which happens to be the same town or area that I am also a teacher in. He teaches in a high school like right down the road from my high school that I teach at. I've known Tim for several years. We both are singers in the semi-professional choir called Vox. Had a very good conversation with Tim today. He gives great advice and options for teaching during COVID-19 for choirs. He gives a great alternative to a virtual choir that is very user-friendly for students and some great project-based learning ideas. This week, we have added listeners in the following countries. We have Finland and Vietnam. Very cool that more and more countries are added each and every week for this podcast. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast, you can fill out the form from my website. Go to my website and fill out the contact form there. You can also send this podcast to other people and suggest guests on that same form. You can watch this podcast on YouTube, and you can access the audio to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. This is episode 27 of the Choir Conductor podcast with Tim Foskey. Tim Foskey, thanks so much for being on the Choir Conductor podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's day 3 of teacher work days before school, before remote school choir starts again.
Oh yeah. So our schools, are probably within a mile or two of each other here in Matthews. So it's really good to talk to you about what's all going on with the choir world for high school in Matthews, North Carolina. So, but we'll get to that. So why don't you start by telling the listeners about what you're currently doing in music, maybe what you were doing 6 months or 7 months ago before COVID.
In the before times.
Yeah, in the pre-COVID times. So let's start with that.
Well, I was at Butler High School. That's where I teach in Matthews. This is my 3rd year teaching at Butler. So last year at this time, I was starting off my 2nd year there and being very excited about the new the kids that I was going to have left over from my 1st year. Excited about the top group chamber choir, what we were going to do. My partner in crime, the theater teacher, we were excited about doing Little Shop of Horrors as our musical, and so the year began, and things were going great. It was really a great year. We hosted the all county chorus for Charlotte Mecklenburg high schools at Butler in November, I believe it was, and we had a great fall concert, and then in the spring we just barely managed to perform the musical Little Shop of Horrors the week before everything shut down.
Wow.
And we were just so lucky that we had it scheduled for that week and not the next week, because we knew we had friends at other schools that got canceled right at the last minute. Oh. So yeah, it was quite the shocking turn of events. And the biggest disappointment was we had planned last year to take a chorus and theater trip to New York City, and in April, and we had planned to have a group sing at St. Cathedral of St. John the Divine to get to experience those acoustics, and we were going to see West Side Story, and so of course that all got canceled, and it was a shame. But that's what I was doing leading up into the current pandemic.
Yeah, my choir was supposed to go to Disney and perform there
Mm-hmm.
the week of our spring break, which was
Mm-hmm.
like 2 days before it all happened. So
Yeah.
yeah, like
Uh,
right before we got the news, like, oh well, there goes that. Yeah, I can't imagine though working, for months on a
mhm.
musical and
Mm-hmm.
then it all go
And
away at the
losing it.
last minute.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, and it actually turned out so well. The kids just were so proud of it, and they just did a great job. We just couldn't have been happier with it.
That's great.
So in a way we got to end on a high note, but
Yeah, right,
but missed our spring concert and all that stuff.
right. And do you also have a church position?
I do. I do. I direct at First United Methodist Church, uptown Charlotte, and it's a small choir. If they're all there, about 17 singers. But great. They've over the years been used to doing really good music, and there's some good readers and good voices in that group, and it's been a delight to work with them. And of course, First United Methodist is a church with amazing acoustics. It just is a wonderful place to sing. It just makes you sound. It makes everything sound better. It makes the
Yeah,
piano sound better. It makes any instrumentalists we ever come play. It's like, oh, it sounds so good in here. I want to play in here all the time.
yeah.
That's been great. So yeah, and I've really missed being able to have a choir in church.
Right. So what has that church been doing as far as services?
We have been having live streamed. So the two ministers and the organist and myself um, are pretty much there every week, as we had been previously. And then it's broadcast through Facebook Live, and I will occasionally pull in an instrumentalist, because of course they've all lost their gigs,
Yeah.
for so they're all we've had an oboist, a violinist, and a trumpet player at Pentecost, and they were all really happy to get a call
Yeah.
um, per gig. But it's such a large sanctuary that it's easy to space out. And it's it's enormous. So the roof is, 50 feet above you. So it's not like it's close in,
Right.
poorly ventilated. So we feel pretty confident about being able to safely do, a live broadcast. So for me, and then I will usually sing a solo for where the anthem would be, or I get one of my choir members that feel comfortable doing that. I've had several choir members to come and sing a solo. And then I do want to, and then I'm in the early process of putting together a virtual choir performance with them, with
Nice.
David Tang's help.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is he gonna
So
do
that's,
all the editing for
well,
that?
he's actually teaching me how to do
Oh,
that.
okay.
So we're trying to spread that knowledge around a little bit, so that
Yeah.
people can have some sort of choir experience while we can't sing together. So
Yeah. Doing the whole virtual choir thing it's like a completely different skill.
oh, it is. It is a totally different skill, and uh, it's but it's something that's fun, and I think uh, for the person that's actually doing the editing and mixing the sounds together, there's a listening skill in that,
Yeah.
in terms of balance and blend, and that I'd like to be able to expose to some of my students at school. You give them an opportunity to try to do that, like, have 8 kids or something record a song and have one of them try to mix it together and make it into a thing. It would be a learning experience for them. And so David Tang has started the Virtual Choir Consortium, which is a online hub for people that want to learn how to do that, learn how to make virtual choirs, just
Right.
to give people the opportunity to learn. I mean, some people are not as interested in that as others, but I think it's going to be fun to at least try something new while we can't really sing together.
Right. Yeah, I agree. My previous guest was James Kevin Gray,
Oh yeah,
the composer of the song that we just did for that consortium,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah. And he did the jazz requiem or jazz mass or
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it was interesting talking to him about his perspective on because he composed the music and then
Hmm.
hearing it now as a virtual choir and what
Hmm.
he was going through in the editing with
Right,
David.
right.
And then my next guest is going to be Michael Austin Miller, who is
Hmm.
the conductor of that.
Yeah,
So it's all all coming full circle with everybody
yeah.
going through that project.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I've done one virtual choir with my high school, and then two virtual worship bands, and
Oh, good.
it's a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so in the spring at school, last spring, I didn't actually do the mixing with myself. I used the app Acapella.
Uh,
There's an app you can get from the App Store, and it allows you can even just do something yourself and make up to 9 different recordings,
okay.
and and what you do it one at a time, and so it automatically lines it up for you. So like I did myself singing a spiritual that I had done in high school years ago, and I just recorded myself singing all the parts. So I started off, singing the soprano part, and then hit record on the different frame, and then you see my head singing, and in my earphones I can hear myself singing that part, but then I sing a different part, and then you can do that with so you can do the same thing with more than one person. So I had 8 of my kids to learn a song, and then I sent it to the first person, and she recorded her part, and then she sent it to the next person who recorded their part, and then sent it to. And by the end, you had something that at least that sounded pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
not as perfectly tuned like you can with the auto, like with the
Right.
reverb and all that, but it was a pretty good end result. And so that was something that, and it wouldn't take quite as long. That's the other thing.
Right.
But it was it was a matter of, you had to make sure that you were on the kids. Okay, make sure you send that to this person and send
Right.
that to this person.
And is that a free app or do you have to pay a little money or?
It's a free app to with certain time limitations. So if you
Oh,
want to
okay.
do something longer, you can pay a little bit. It's not a huge expense, but there is it's you can get like a minute or two recording for free.
Oh, great. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that could be another good alternative for, people, especially if they're going virtual or a hybrid model
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
semester to do even just one of those if you don't
You
want
could
to go through
assign
the
that
whole.
to a group of students,
Yeah.
and they can do it themselves.
Ah,
It's a pretty user-friendly interface, and it's designed with young people in mind. When it prompts you to save to places like Instagram and
oh, cool.
these social media spots where people can have their little things. And so I actually, this summer, I was just, bored and tired of being doing the same thing every day. And so I recorded myself playing a four-hand piano sonata by
Yeah.
Clementi. And do you play piano? Did you grow up playing piano?
I would say I can get by.
Oh, okay. Well, I
I
did.
would say, yeah.
You probably didn't know. For those that grew up learning like classical music, there's this. I don't know if you're familiar with Muzio Clementi, the Italian composer. He has composed these classic sonatinas that a lot of young piano players learn, that are really
Oh,
fun,
okay.
but not too hard, but fun and challenging. Well, then he composed sonatas, larger pieces for four hands that I'd never played before, and I had a book. And so I said, I'm just going to learn both the upper part and the lower part, and recorded myself playing the one and the other and put it together. And it was kind of fun. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty cool.
yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's good having all these different alternatives to do. I like that idea of having a smaller group of students, like, okay, here,
Hmm.
you 8,
Hmm.
this is your deal. Here's the
Yes.
song.
Yep.
Do it. And
Right.
then
And yeah, make it, yeah, do the whole thing, make it expressive and yeah.
yeah, that's great. I'm probably going to use that idea.
Yeah.
And so kind of let's back up a little bit. What was your musical upbringing like? And you mentioned you probably started off on piano or something.
Yeah, I did. So my my mom was always loved music as a child, but she never had a piano growing up. So when she um, was first at her first job before she got married, um, saved up money to buy a little spinet piano. And it was her first big purchase, but she never herself learned to play. But when she got married and had kids, that was what we all learned on. So I have an older brother, and he was taking piano lessons. So he probably was in maybe second grade, maybe third grade, and he always got to stay up 30 minutes later than myself and my fraternal twin brother. We had to go to bed at what, like 8:30. He got to stay up till 9. But he always delayed his practicing. He never wanted to practice, so he would always be practicing right before he went to bed. So I would be in bed myself, hearing him practice the piano,
Oh yeah.
and thinking to myself how I really wanted to play the piano myself. And so I begged my mom to let me take piano lessons, and so I I think it was first grade when I started, uh, when I was about 6, um, uh, and and it was, I loved it from the very beginning, and I got pretty good. So I took piano all through my time in school, and so that's how I learned to read music. And then of course I always sang in the church choir and the children's choir at church, and then when I got to high school, it was the first time there was a real strong choral program in my schooling, and so
Where did you
and
grow up?
this was Chapel Hill.
Okay.
I had a really good elementary music teacher, and by the time I got to high school, that same teacher, Pat Bile, she had just started she had just taken over at the high school um, for the choral program, and so I joined the chorus as a sophomore, my first year in high school, and because back then it was 10th, 11th, 12th, and and I loved it. And so then she got me to audition for the North Carolina Honors Chorus, and so I was accepted into Honors Chorus that year,
Nice.
and that was it. Like when I was able to sing at the concert with the 150 other people from all over the state doing this amazingly difficult music, and just I was so blown away by the sound that I was hooked on choral music, at that from that point on, and so yeah, and of course I had I had always said that I wanted to be a teacher growing up. I used to imagine myself, it was always whatever grade I was in. So in first grade, I want to be a first grade teacher when I grew up. And then when I was in second grade, no, I don't want to be, I want to be a second grade teacher when I grew up. So, but eventually it was pretty much music was the thing. And so yeah, that's how I ended up going to school and becoming a choir director.
That's pretty great. So for
Yeah,
you starting piano at such a young age, do you have perfect pitch?
I do actually. Yeah, that was that was something that my piano teacher discovered when I was probably, I don't know, fourth grade, third or fourth grade, and it
Uh-huh.
was, I forget exactly how it was something where she was saying or she had played a note wrong or something, and I was like, that's supposed to be a B flat or something. I couldn't remember exactly, but she was like, well, how did you know that I played that wrong? I said, well, you did, you just played it. Well, I didn't know that it was anything different. She goes, go stand over there. She told me to go across the room away from the piano, and then she started plunking out notes and getting me to name them, and she was like, you have perfect pitch. I'm like, oh. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, everybody can't do that. So
Like
so
no.
yeah, so that's always been fun to, a good skill to have.
Right. And do you find that it's helpful most of the time? Is it ever a hindrance for singing?
Um, well, it's I found that it's somewhat of a hindrance in teaching sight singing to my students now, because I don't because it's harder for me to gauge how hard something's going to be.
Right.
I tend to think, oh yeah, they can do that. That'll be easy. And then it's like they're struggling. I'm thinking, why are you struggling with it? and and I don't and so and also in terms of like identifying specific intervals, like I don't know what a augmented such and such is, or a diminished that. Yeah, I don't think about the interval really. When I'm singing, I'm just thinking about what note it is, and I'm just going to sing that note, and I don't really think about like the interval. So when I'm teaching students, they need to know how to sing a fifth and how to sing this,
Right.
and think about that without the context of just this note to this note. And so, so in that sense, I think it's somewhat of a hindrance. Although, if I do really well with solfege, it's still pretty good.
So like if you're reading in the key of C,
Hmm.
but they take a like down a half step, does that mess with you?
That drives me crazy. I hate that. Like I hate it when like Baroque pitch. I hate
Yeah.
Baroque pitch. I really hate Baroque pitch. So and actually uh when we did the Bach St. John Passion, were
Uh,
you still with us when we did that?
no, I just
You were down
left.
in Florida. So
Yeah.
we did the St. John Passion a couple of years ago, and David took it down a half step, and I literally wrote out the whole thing. Like I used Sibelius to just because I could do it, but it's so fast, like some
Right.
of
Oh yeah.
the notes that like my brain's just not quite to transpose each one down. Like it was so much
Hmm.
easier just to have it written. So like instead of G major, I put an F sharp major or
Yeah.
whatever it's supposed to be. It was like I just put it
Right.
whatever key it should have been. And so that we were the new key that we were singing in. And so yeah, it took some time, but for me it was
Yeah.
worth it.
That's interesting. What about like in like a cappella music whenever like the pitch will start to drift?
That is frustrating. Although I don't like I won't hold mine against
Right.
like because
Like,
then it
nope,
would
this
just
is
come
it.
back. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, so I'll go with it, but it always drives me crazy. I can tell, which is one of the things that's really been fun about singing with Vox is honestly, this is the best group of singers I've ever sung with in terms of being able to maintain a cappella pitch.
Yeah.
Like
That's great.
very rarely do Vox, do we sag in pitch. And occasionally in a rehearsal, we will sometimes, but
Right.
most of the time, we are really spot on in Vox. And so that's nice for me, because I'm just like, I can listen, I can really focus on tuning, and it's just, and it doesn't go because there's just some crackerjack sight readers in Vox.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great group to be with.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let's transition to so now so your school it's going full virtual teaching.
Yes, yes. Charlotte Mecklenburg is fully remote at least for the first semester, I believe.
Oh wow.
Um, at least first quarter. They might reevaluate by the end of first quarter and see how
Hmm.
things are going.
And
Um,
so what kind of things well first what kind of things did you do but you mentioned the acapella app
yeah, yeah,
in these last 9 weeks, what did you
yeah.
end up doing?
So, well, I mean, all along, I've been teaching music literacy to the students, trying to teach them to read music and to be able to know rhythms and sight reading. And so there's a wonderful online sight reading software called Sight Reading Factory. And are you familiar with that? So they
Yeah,
have,
I think my school has a subscription to it.
yeah, and so I had already bought a my own personal subscription to use just as a teacher in class, and so you could project onto the screen pretty much an infinite number of rhythmic examples or sight reading examples, and the students could, as a class, read them. And so it was very inexpensive just for a teacher subscription. But what Sight Reading Factory did when the COVID happened was they offered their full student subscriptions for free until June 30th.
Oh, wow.
And so I was able to get a student subscription, which meant, and they also integrated with the online learning platform that we were using, Canvas.
Yeah.
And so what I was able to do was to set up a sequenced sight reading assignment. So I would do a rhythm assignment, and then I would do a sight singing assignment. And you can set up the parameters, how many measures you want it to be. You know, like with rhythms, you can specifically select which note values, or whether you're going to have rest, whether you're going to have syncopation, whether you can really customize the difficulty. And so you would make an assignment, and then the student would log on to their Canvas page, see the assignment, and then their device would record them as they saw the rhythm or saw the solfege. And then they would click submit, and then I would get that recording, and I could see what they were supposed to be reading and hear in my ear what they were singing. And so what I found was that this was a really even better way for me to hear my own students sing, because in class, you get the whole picture, but you don't have time to really hear them individually. And so their individual skills became much clearer to me. Even though I did have them, you know, I've done other evaluations, but this was a good way. And so I did a lot of those Sight Reading Factory assignments, just to kind of make sure they kept on top of that music literacy. And then I also had them submit recordings of themselves singing their vocal part to one of our songs. So for each class, we were kind of just getting started with challenging songs that we were planning to do for the spring concert.
Yeah.
And so for each of my classes, I had the students to make a recording of themselves singing their part with the piano accompaniment. So I recorded the piano accompaniment and sent that to them, and then they recorded themselves singing with it. And so I was able to evaluate how they did with that. And then I also I was just kind of trying to come up with anything for them to do, because it was so sudden.
Right.
And so I did a soundtrack of your life assignment, where the kids chose any song they wanted to represent them, like a set of about 5 or 6 songs, and they had to create online a little brochure that showed who they were and what they were about, and they would have a link to whatever song was about them and why that song meant something to them, and so they
That's
enjoyed
cool.
doing that. And then I also had them for a listening assignment. Are you familiar with NPR's Tiny Desk concert thing they do? Where so just a musical artist comes into the NPR office and plays for them. And so I didn't even realize they had tons of these on YouTube that you can see. And so I invited the kids to search. I picked out a few, like Taylor Swift and the Harry Styles and the Jonas, some pop singers that the kids would be interested in. But then I also invited them to just search for anybody if they wanted to find a Tiny Desk concert, and they had to write like a 1-page thing about what the artist was trying to say in there, because a lot of times they talk about their own process, and so and how things were different when you hear them in that setting as opposed to in the big concert setting.
Oh, right, yeah.
So things like that. We did things like that at the end of last year.
That's great. Have you seen Contus? There's a vocal group from Minneapolis. So they did a Tiny Desk concert.
Oh, I'm sure that was great. I've seen them perform. I've seen them perform in concert. Yeah,
it's really good. So yeah, so
Yeah.
anyone that's listening and watching this, go check out
Yeah.
Contus there.
Contours, Tiny Desk Concert. I think I
Yeah,
will definitely do that.
yeah, it was really good. Those are some cool ideas. What going back to the sight reading, what rhythmic system do you use?
I use Takadimi.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with that one?
that's what I use.
Um, yeah, I did a workshop with uh, Carol Kruger,
Yeah,
who kind of came up with that,
she's
and
amazing.
she is really really good. Yeah, I was pretty much drinking the Kool-Aid with her, but I like I like how it just sort of matches up, and it has to do with what the beat function of the beat is, as opposed to just sort of calling it this and calling it that. And uh, and it seems to work well. I mean, my kids have had some success with it, so I kind of I like that one.
Yeah, I switched. So when I moved to Florida, I think my first or second year, I switched to Takadimi because her
Hmm.
daughter was from that area, and then her son-in-law was
Hmm.
teaching at a school of the arts
Right.
there. So I talked to him, and then yeah, I switched over to Takadimi. It was great. Yeah, I got Carol Kruger to work with my choir when I was in Florida, and it was amazing. So yeah,
Hmm.
highly recommend
Yeah,
Carol
she's
Kruger
really
and
good.
Takadimi. Yeah, that's great. And do you
Yeah.
use movable solfege? I mean, sorry, movable dough or fixed
Yes.
dough?
Yes. I do movable dough. And now uh, this is what, and I've not done a lot with minor. The scale, what I've taught minor, I've done the la minor, where
Okay.
where you're the relative, so you're la to la.
Yeah.
So you're using like essentially the relative minor.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's an argument in the field about whether it's better to use do minor, and
Uh-huh.
so do re
May.
me instead
Yeah.
of do re mi, right? And
Yeah.
then as opposed to um, doing la. So the advantage of doing law based minor is that you can sing do re mi fa sol la ti la so fa mi re do ti la, and then la ti
Mm-hmm.
do fa mi re. Then you have your natural minor scale is already built in, but then you still have to use those other syllables if you're going to then go to the the
Right.
harmonic minor or the melodic minor. So I I kind of go back and forth in my head as which is theoretically better way to teach minor,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
I do believe in movable dough.
right. Yeah. That's what I use. I use dough based minor just because that's what I was taught. So I don't
Hmm.
know. Well, I've you can argue
Yeah,
both ways. For me, I think about it as
yeah.
dough is always your home base. So for me, it
Dough is your tonic. Yes,
feels that, but
yes. Feels stronger, right?
you,
That's
you
kind of
know
what I was thinking too. And the
you can argue both ways.
I mean, maybe I'll switch it this year. Yeah, the teacher, the orchestra teacher who teaches AP music theory, she her class always does sight singing as
Oh,
part of
cool.
AP music theory, and so she has used my room to teach that class because she's there. It's usually my planning period, and so I've been in the room where she's been teaching the do bass minor, and then like in the lesson before I had done la bass minor, and I'd be thinking, I kind of think do might be better. Oh, I can't decide. It's just so
Yeah.
there's no one right or wrong. Whatever works for whoever's teaching. That's
Right. Yeah, I usually just tell my students, look, this is the way that I know how to do it. But whenever you go to college, they could say, nope, you're doing it this way. You're using
Yeah,
numbers, and everything can
yeah,
change. It's just this is the way
yeah,
that
yeah,
I find the best, but it's
exactly.
not the way.
And well, and I refuse to write SOL for because I just think let's be consistent. Just make it a consonant and a vowel. We don't need SOL, even if it was solfeggio.
Right. Yeah. That's great. And so, now
but
that you're
but
now that you're going full remote again, is there anything that you plan on doing differently?
Well, I want to do more singing with them, like really working with the students singing. So I want to do more, um, uh, get more of them to sing. And David Tang has told me about ways that you can have a little bit of rehearsal together. There's certain software, I'm not sure exactly how they work, where like you can conduct for them. They mute everything. They're singing. Um, and they hear themselves, but then it mixes their voices kind of right then for you to hear, and then you can play it back to them, I think is how it works.
Oh wow.
So I'm going to experiment with, I mean, I'm not going to do like a lot of that, but
Right.
just maybe in terms of just teaching a little bit of a song to get them started. I want to do work more with students individually. And another, I saw in an online message group, a choral teacher that said, hey, we're all teachers of voice. Use this opportunity to have voice lessons and teach and work with kids individually. And so I may try to do that, like invite kids to say, hey, who would be interested in learning a solo? And they wouldn't necessarily have to have anyone here except for me, but then I could actually, do a lesson with them over Zoom. And I can work with them, their voices individually that way. So yeah, I want to do more and listening assignments but continue the music theory and music literacy piece as well.
Yeah. This is a very unique opportunity for that, to do things that you have like always wanted to do, but you always feel, oh, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
time for that because the concert's in, next week or
Right.
whatever. Now theoretically
Right. Well, that's
there are
just
no
it. We don't have that
concerts.
pressure. That's right. That's right. And there's no MPA, so it's
Right.
not there's not that pressure that you've got to have your choir in perfect condition. It's like I can really work with them individually now. So I got to try to look at it on the bright side.
Right. Yeah. um, Kind of going through a couple more questions and then we'll wrap some things up. What things have you either been reading, listening to, or watching that you would recommend to others?
Well, um, I've done a lot of reading over the summer and of course at the end of the last spring. But two of the books that I really enjoyed recently had nothing to do with music, but one was Where the Crawdads Sing, which has been on the bestseller list for a long time. Um, it's set in North Carolina from about the early 50s to about 1970, a 20-year period there, and it's a part murder mystery, part love story about this woman who basically grows up all by herself in this shack in the marsh on the coast, and has to fend for herself, and it's basically about her life and how she's able to survive, but then there's also this murder, and it's a big it's a remarkable novel. So that's yeah, it's true page turner,
Yeah.
and well written, very well written. And then the other book that both the books had real strong female protagonists. The other book was the Book of Longings, which is an imagining of this first century feminist, basically, who longs to be a writer and to be considered, to have her opinions on things valued, and her and to be able to to write and to express how she feels about things. And of course, at that time, she's basically just the property of the men around her.
Oh.
And but she ends up meeting and marrying Jesus. So it imagines it's you meet Jesus when he's 20. So 12, 13 years for his ministry. And so it's in that time, a man at that age would have been expected by his family to marry. And if he hadn't, received his call yet or what have you, they're just imagining what that would be like. So the author gave Jesus a real personality. So it emphasized the human aspect. and his respect for his wife, and she was able to do things with him that she couldn't in other places. But it really focuses more on her, and so it's really very, very interesting, and you need an open mind to to read
Right.
it and appreciate it. But I liked it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, advice to my younger self.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Don't be afraid to go for what you're interested in. Uh, when opportunities arise, take them, and always practice hard. you know, uh, I think there's not a lot looking back that I regret, but I do say that, like, being where I am now. Just I would say accept who you are, and be confident, and just go for it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's always interesting looking back. You theoretically, you obviously you really can't change anything, but it's really more,
Hmm.
if there's someone my age that I'm thinking about, if I could just tell them this, but whenever you're that age, you're not going to listen anyway.
Yeah.
So it
Well, and then the one thing that I would change going back, is I would have come out a lot sooner
right.
than I did, because I was out of grad school before I ever even allowed myself to accept who I was,
Yeah.
and so, but when I told my parents, they were like, "Okay, we love you." I mean, they did everything that parents should do when you tell them that you're gay.
That's great.
They were great, which is great. So it's like I wish I could go back to say to my high school self, just go ahead and just be who you are. And but it was harder then, in the 80s
Right.
and early 90s, wasn't quite as accepted as it is now. Like, shoot, the kids in high school now, it's like no big deal at all.
Right.
So, but like, it would have been, nice to have been a little bit more comfortable with myself at a younger age, but
Yeah,
hey.
I think everyone would have liked to be more comfortable with themselves when they're younger.
Yeah, exactly. What you don't realize when you're young is that everybody feels as outside as you do. Like,
Right.
everybody else has got it made, and you're the one that doesn't, and
Yeah.
they probably all think the same
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I mean, thank you so much. This has been great. I've learned a lot. Every podcast, I take away some great ideas. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap this podcast up?
No, other than I really appreciate you thinking of me, and asking me to do it. It was a very enjoyable conversation, and of course, I have a lot of respect for your talents, and I'm so glad that you're back in the Charlotte area, and
Yeah.
and it's nice to be able to see another musician and talk, because we miss seeing each other in rehearsal.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, whenever things go back to normal, Vox will pick back up, and hopefully one
Yep.
day our two schools can do something with choir related. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. It would be, because we're both in Matthews. So,
Yeah. Well, again, thanks so much, Tim.
all right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to the Choir Conductor podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave a review. Go to zackthompsonmusic.weebly.com for show notes, an archive of podcast episodes, and free compositions. Have a great week.